Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Cecil TV. I'm Grant Hanley, your political correspondent. And today I'm joined with Cecil County Council President Jackie Gregory. Jackie, thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thank you, Grant. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, no problem. Jackie, before we dive into things, I figured let's give you a moment to kind of talk about your background and just give us a little, hi, who are you?
Okay, perfect. So I moved to Cecil County in 1996, just after I graduated college. I went to college to get a teaching degree, and I ended up teaching for 6 years in Hartford County as a full-time public school teacher. And I taught for a number of years after that. Once I had kids, I wanted to stay home with them. So I actually worked for a company that did the home teaching program virtually before virtual was a big thing with COVID. I did it long before that for this company that did the home program for Carroll County. So, I have a long history in education, and just, I know we're going to be talking about educational issues tonight. So just wanted to give my perspective on that, about how important I believe public education is. As a council person, and as a conservative, I think we need to have a very strong public education system. I became a teacher because I believe that education, not just any education, but a good education, has the opportunity to be a great equalizer of society. And I became an English teacher, not only because I love to read and write, which is true, but because I think literacy is the foundation for pretty much anything someone does in life. So, and as far as the role of our schools, when I went to college, we learned about something called multiple intelligences, because all kids are different. I have 3 kids, and my one son graduated from the school system last year. I have a daughter that's currently in the school system. They are completely different. My son graduated from the tech school. He's very much hands oriented. He works with his hands. He's good with that. He was not an academic child. So that was really a godsend for him. My daughter, on the other hand, is very artistic. So, I think our schools need to cultivate all of these things for our kids. And, that's why I think education is really important. And, I was very disappointed to see some of the things that were being proposed, because, these are things that make kids enjoy school and could end up being part of their future career as well. And, we need educated people to have a thriving community and a thriving society. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And, Cecil County, I moved here because it's beautiful, and it was a great place to raise a family, and that's still, the case, and just want to preserve that.
Great. I appreciate that, Jackie. Mm-hmm. So as you kind of alluded to, today we're going to be talking a lot about public education, and in particular the Cecil County Public Schools budget. Now, for me, I like Facebook. Facebook is helpful. Social media has done a lot of great things for the world, connecting people and things like that. But sometimes it can also be misleading with information. And I think we've seen a lot of information presented on Facebook, some things perhaps accurate, some things inaccurate. And so some of these questions we have today for you, Jackie, are just kind of setting the record straight. What is true, what is misleading and not true, because I think for the average person, when they try to follow along on this issue on Facebook, they get a lot of conflicting information. So with that being said, I think our first question is a good example of that. You go on Facebook, and when it comes to local, state, federal, and grant funding sources, I've seen on Facebook some people say Cecil County Public Schools is funded 24 out of 24, and there are other instances where I see we're funded 17th out of 24. Can you provide some elaboration on what's actually correct and why?
Yes. Okay. So that's a great question. So the Department of Legislative Services for the states does an analysis every year for all of the school systems in the state. And as you mentioned, there's numerous funding sources. The funding sources they look at are state and local government. As far as local funding, which is where the confusion comes in, our local funding is 17th out of 24 counties, and we actually would not be allowed to be 24th anyways, because our local funding formula is based on county wealth, and we are 16th. Now, we've been 17th in local funding from the prior administration all the way through this administration. That has not changed. In 2023, what happened was we dropped a ranking in state funding. we went down a ranking, and because we are one of the poorer counties, that has a larger impact on our overall funding. Now this year for 2024, the new numbers are up. We went back up in state funding, and we are no longer last. Queen Anne's County, unfortunately, has that honor for 2024. But you will see in overall funding, it's the middle counties like ours that are not the richest counties and not the poorest counties that usually tend to be towards the bottom, because we don't get the massive amount of funding like that Baltimore City would have, but we also don't have the tax base that Howard County has. But yes, we are 17th in local funding and have been year after year. So to say we're last because of local funding is just not true.
So you're saying the drop off here is because of other entities,
yes.
state government?
Absolutely. 100%.
Okay, that's interesting. Another question here that we've seen very, very topical on social media is those who probably aren't for those on the other side of the issue of what CCPS is promoting. We hear about transparency a lot. CCPS's lack of transparency and what they show and what they don't show. So I'd like to ask you, Jackie, what CCPS budget information has not been made available to you, maybe over the past couple years or this year? What transparency issues are you having exactly?
Okay, that's a good question. And actually, it's a statewide issue. MACO is actually Maryland Association of Counties, has that as their top initiative, one of their 4 top initiatives for this legislative session. Now, prior to 2019, we used to have a line item budget available. That hasn't been available for a number of years. And honestly, up until last year, I assumed that it was at least being made available to the school board, because I don't think an entity that has a $258 million budget can it be effectively run by just dividing that into 15 broad categories. And if you look at any other county in the state, they provide line item budgets. That's an expected thing that's provided. Our county government provides it. Anytime someone gets public funds, and honestly, any corporation that's a multi-million-dollar corporation has a budget that they operate off of. So what we've gotten are PowerPoints, which are snippets, and I would compare it to a puzzle where we're given maybe 50 pieces of an 1,000-piece puzzle and told to figure it out. And it makes it really difficult for us. And we're somewhat removed. County government, the way it's set up in Maryland, is a little bit removed from the school budget anyways, because we're not the school board. The school board oversees everything. So like I said, I thought until last year that they were at least getting it. And then I asked a school board member to show me the binder they received, and was surprised when I saw the 2 public PowerPoints that were presented, which really they have a lot of charts and snippets of information, but not comprehensive information. What we're looking for is to see year over year spending. I don't want to know how much a stick of glue costs or how many sticks of glue they have, but I want to see the supply budget. I want to see the travel budget. I want to see year over year if more money is going into administration than the classroom, if there's cuts in certain areas or certain programs. I want to see that. And that helps us when we're making decisions about the budget. And, in the past, when they've received maintenance of effort, we don't have any control over how they spend their budget, and we're required to provide a certain amount. But every department has to justify above. When they ask for a larger amount of money, they have to show, well, where has your money gone? How has it benefited the community, in this case, the students? And what will you do with more money? And so that is really what we're looking for here. It's hard to make a good decision without that information. And it honestly, I've been kind of amazed, because some reactions to this are like, we're asking the superintendent to climb Mount Everest, and it's not anything like that. This is standard operating procedure. And when the request was made, I was under the assumption that they at least were operating under some kind of line item budget, and it wasn't a monumental task, because and we're not, there's been some questions about, are you looking for something specific? Do they have to do it a certain way? They can pick any of the counties in the state that have a school board that do a line item budget, which is all of the other ones, and do what they do. Wacomico County, which is the same size as ours, has like a 150-page budget and about 80 pages of line items. Calvert County, same thing, about 100 pages of line items. So they could go back to what they did prior to 2019, and I'd be satisfied with that. But we need to see the year-over-year spending, and we're not getting that. And so that's really what we're asking for. And that gives us transparency. And it's not just for county council to make decisions. The public should be aware. That should be publicly available for anybody who wants it. Currently, it does not exist.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Thank you very much for that insight. Talking about the CCPS budget now, in particular, we kind of a quick timeline recap that I know you're certainly aware of. The CCPS administration had presented a hypothetical budget to the school board that held a lot of cuts based upon what I believe was the maintenance effort funding, and it was one hypothetical budget. And then on the February 7th school board meeting, they restored a lot of those cuts based upon the request of the school board. So the current, I'm going to say mock budget, because nothing's been voted on. The current mock budget is about $17 million over maintenance effort, the state required minimum. Is there any wiggle room of what the council and the county executive can work with there? Is there any sort of compromise wiggling room from maintenance effort to their $17 million ask now? And I know it's a loaded question, but maybe kind of take that.
Fair question. Okay. So, and I'd have to get more detail on this, but I know that they were also adding more in to hire some additional teachers. So I thought that was an additional 4.4 million. And then according to the blueprint, we are required over the next 10 years to provide an additional 5 million every year. So if you think about it, it's actually going to be between 25 and 30 million above what last year's number was. Now, 5 million of that is built in as part of what the state says is our local share. So is there wiggle room? Yeah, I think that when you look at budgets each year, you have to look at what's available at that particular point in time. And of course, our situation has changed. So there has been temporary COVID funds that have run out. And I know that I think last year they put about 16 million of that in their budget. And there's other things that are coming into play here this year. Now, is 25, in my opinion, is 25 to $30 million a realistic ask? I think what that would mean for the county, and I think the taxpayers need to be aware of this, is, yeah, we have a fund balance, but within a few years, within a couple years, and we have a lot of that designated towards certain things, that has to serve the entire county. That would be obliterated, and we'd be raising taxes within a couple of years to fund that. So I think that the ask, is there wiggle room? Yes, of course, but there needs to be a realistic ask. We need the transparency, we need the accountability, and then we need to come to the table to see how we can work together to make this work in a way that's not going to, like I said, obliterate our fund balance and also cause us to raise taxes. We made a promise to taxpayers that we're not going to raise taxes, and the blueprint already has a lot of additional funding baked into it year over year. So, we'll have to see what they finally come up with, but, we need to have conversations about these things. And, the COVID funding, this is kind of interesting because most of this is not due to maintenance of effort. I'll just be perfectly honest with you. What they've asked for over the last 3 years compared to what they've received is $6 million. They've accumulated more than that in their fund balance. So they've had the money funded over the past few years. Over the last 3 years, their budget has grown by $45 million. In contrast, like the 3 years prior to COVID, it grew by $13.5 million. So there's been a lot of funding over the last few years, and a lot of that had to do with the blueprint kicking in 23. Between 23 and 24, the state provided an extra $25 million, increased their budget by $25 million. The state actually took the responsibility for blueprint before the county, so the county funding is coming later. So there's a lot of things that played into the budget over the last few years, but they've had money. And for context, for when we were discussing the 2022 budget, most people don't know this, but Dr. Lawson actually asked for maintenance of effort that year, and later was bumped up by $2 million because the state came back and recalculated. But he got what he asked for, and then what he had budgeted, he actually got $2 million more. So moving forward, things are a bit different with the COVID funding going away, but we really need to see where that money was used in the classroom. And, you know, a lot of the things that are being threatened to be cut, sports, gifted and talented, honors, AP, those things weren't funded with COVID money. They weren't funded with the ESSER money. So there's no reason why sports should be on the chopping block due to COVID cuts. It doesn't make any sense. And it was very upsetting for me as a parent of a school student, and knowing how upset the kids are and the parents are because of this. So, but in short, yes, we need to come to the table and we need to talk, but we need to also, the school board needs to also be conscious of, you know, they represent the taxpayers too, even though they don't have taxing authority and really have no responsibility in funding the budget, but they also need to be accountable for passing a budget that's responsible, and that where they're also looking at transparency and accountability in the budget, which we haven't seen in the past.
Okay, so one of the things you had brought up, which was another popular type of point of conversation, is CCPS's surplus, their fund balance, and how there's definitely certainly probably a high dollar amount sitting in that fund. Where does their fund balance amount compare to like the counties in terms of safety net? Because I think it, you know, there's best practice probably has, you have a safety net in that balance to make sure if anything were to go wrong, you can afford it. But at what point does that nest egg get too high? So I was just curious if you knew where does maybe their surplus or fund balance fund kind of compare to the counties in terms of money you don't really touch?
Okay. So, first of all, it's interesting because Dr. Lawson has made that comparison between the school system's fund balance and the county's fund balance, which is really not a fair comparison to make, because we are a supporting entity and they are a supported entity. They have guaranteed funding. We do not. We depend on taxpayers. We depend on the market. And when the, excuse my language, the crap hits the fan, people are coming to the county to ask them to make, you know, to fund what they need. Nobody goes to Cecil County Public Schools for that. So the way that Cecil, and I would never suggest that they eradicate their entire fund balance, because there is some time that it takes. If the council were to consider, if there was an emergency, it takes a little bit of time for, you know, the legislation to go through to get money from our fund balance. But we do have a lot of money set aside for the public school system within our fund balance. We have money set aside for the new Northeast Middle High School. We took money out of there for the safe and secure entrances. We have money for blueprint spending in the future, and really our fund balance is available for any entity that needs it. So the way Cecil County Public School gets their fund balance, and theirs has increased from $9 million right before COVID to almost $19 million now. And that is because over those last 4 years, they were able to accumulate some operating funds from their government sources that they did not spend in their budget. And so what happens is that rolls into their fund balance, which is another way to know that if you're underfunded, you're spending your entire budget. You're not able to put money into savings. So so the comparison there between the two, of course, the county has like $130 million fund balance. It's about, I think, 20 million, which is unassigned. The school system currently has about 19 million and about 6 million, which is unassigned. Other public entities like the Sheriff's Department have zero fund balance. Public Works has zero fund balance because it's the county that supports them. And our fund balance, again, is for everyone. And if you think back in history, why the county has such a large fund balance now, back in 2008, 2009, we had a recession. And a few years after that, when Terry Moore, our first county executive, was in office, we actually lost tax revenue because of the recession. And she used the fund balance to be able to fund all the departments. It balanced the budget for a couple of years. And what we found at that time was that it was depleted very quickly because we didn't have a large enough fund balance to support all the entities we needed to support. And it was at that point there was a decision made to try to grow our fund balance so that way when we look at things in the future, like I don't know how many people know this, but the governor is cutting $1 million this year from the Cecil College budget. We have upcoming transportation fund cuts, which means that we're going to be getting less from the state. And if we want to maintain our roads, we're going to pay for it. We have additional blueprint requirements in the future. Like next year, the mandate where the money follows the child will be implemented. The state actually put that off for a year, postponed that for a year. And that was a lot of the reason why the school system was saying it was going to need a lot more money. So next year, when that gets implemented, there's going to be another big ask from the school system. So we have to prepare for all of these things, and we need to be responsible and accountable with our budget. So comparing, it always kind of makes me chuckle when there's a comparison between the school fund balance when they are a supported entity and the county fund balance when we actually our fund balance is their fund balance. Our fund balance is a sheriff's department's fund balance. Our fund balance belongs to the DPW. All of these entities depend on the county. Cecil County Public Schools' only job is to support itself. Well, actually, we support it, but their only job is to take care of their own, managing their own money that they get from taxpayers. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, fair enough. That was good insight to know. I did not know that. My final question for you tonight, Jackie, is you touched on it a lot, really controversial when it was in the Maryland General Assembly. The Kerwin Commission, what is the county's obligation, and how do you guys plan on providing that funding? How does Kerwin impact Cecil County?
Okay. Yeah, so we received what it's going to look like years out. Of course, so this upcoming year, it's $5 million more in our local share. It looks like the school system's going to come back with a much larger ask than that. Over the next 10 years, it's an increase in local funding of $50 million. It's an average of $5 million a year. The state funding, they fund it, like I mentioned, they funded a lot on the front end. So within the first 2 years, they increased their funding by about $25 million. And then in the out year, the next 10 years, it's an average of about $3.5 million per year. So every year between the state and local government, the school system is guaranteed another $8.5 million. And then, federal funds vary from year to year. I would expect that into the future, the federal funds will be increasing as well.
Okay. Interesting. Well, Jackie, as you know, probably since 2016, politics have been pretty unpleasant. You have a lot of polarization on the national level, state level, and even in Cecil County, it seems like you have side A and side B. So, Jackie, kind of as a departing farewell message here, what is your message to the voters of Cecil County Public Schools, and anyone just watching today about these issues and kind of about where we are today?
All right, thank you for that question. So, education should never be a political issue. It's something that affects all of us. Unfortunately, it's an election year, and so it's become a political issue. And I would just encourage our citizens to, we are a largely conservative county. I would encourage everyone to just try to get the facts. I know there's a lot of information out there from all different sides, and I am happy to talk to anyone. My number's on the county website, my cell phone number. You're welcome to reach out to me. And I don't expect anyone to take my word for it. I will provide you documentation because I think that's important that you see the information for yourself and don't just believe, what one person says. But unfortunately, this has become a very political issue. And in any election year, there's usually a group that gets involved and wants to transform what our county is about. And there are a few groups that have latched onto this movement. Now, I don't want to suggest that that's entirely what this is, because based on what people have been told, there are parents and there are kids with some real legitimate concerns. And, they should be asking the questions. Absolutely. But to the same point, it's important that the correct information gets out there. And there are certain groups and one of them that has really latched onto this is Cecil Solidarity. Cecil Solidarity, for those who don't know, I'd encourage you to look at their website. It's our local Black Lives Matter group. It's our defund the police group. If you go on their homepage, one of their immediate goals is to defund the police. They wrote horrible things about our sheriff's department and our deputies outside of the sheriff's department a couple years ago in sidewalk chalk, like horrible names, venomous things that they said. And, I think that people need to be aware what the goal is here. It's to get conservatives out of office, to put people in that represent their values, which are not the values of the majority of people in Cecil County. And, if they're successful, you're not going to recognize Cecil County anymore. We are a conservative county, but we won't be. They want to put people in who will give a blank check to whatever organizations they feel should get a blank check, whether it's the public school system or somebody else. And so what I would say is there are, they have become a big part of this movement. They actually organized the treasurer for Cecil Solidarity and the founder of Cecil Solidarity. It's Jared Gardipe and Christine Givens organized the protest that was outside the county building. They organized the whole thing. So what I would say is any candidate that locks arms with an organization like that, shame on you. Shame on you.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank Jackie Gregory, Cecil County Council President, for joining us today. For our viewers at home wondering why this is on Zoom, I actually have COVID, so couldn't do it in the studio, but thank you to our viewers. Thank you, Jackie. This has been a Cecil TV interview, and have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.